On August 29, 2011, just after 7 in the morning, Dale West turned off Highway 18 onto a gravel road outside Winner, South Dakota, with a 1999 Chevrolet one-ton truck that had 287,000 miles on the dash, rust along both wheel wells, and a patch-stock trailer stacked with small square bales she sold for exactly $12 each. Dust hung behind her in a long tan ribbon, while the trailer chains clicked against steel. At the co-op lot, newer diesel pickups sat in a neat line, polished and high on lift kits, and Dale parked at the far edge beside a seed tender with a broken taillight. She stepped out wearing sun-faded overalls, a cap bleached nearly white, and work gloves stitched twice at the palms. Nobody looked at her twice until she pulled a wrinkled cash envelope from her pocket and counted out $486 for twine, $93 for shear bolts, and $214 for diesel credit. She settled in full before taking another load ticket. The judgments came quietly, which is how they usually come in small towns. A clerk with a pressed shirt and clean boots asked if she wanted to put the rest on account. A younger buyer from town, picking up feed for 2 hobby horses, asked whether she gave discounts for weathered bales. Trent Halverson, dealership salesman, leaned on the counter in a crisp logo cap and told another man, loud enough to carry, that anybody still running a 1978 baler with 9,400 field hours was one breakdown away from being done by winter. Dale heard all of it, signed her receipt, and said only, "Load by noon, 12 each, bring exact cash." By appearance, she looked stretched thin. By arithmetic, she was already stable, in a way most people around that counter were not. That night, after the truck cooled in the yard and the house settled, she sat at her kitchen table under a yellow light and opened a black ledger with ruled columns: bale count, moisture, fuel, twine, repair, gross, net, reserve transfer. Every line matched receipts, clipped with a rusted binder clip. The numbers were plain. For every dollar of net margin, she moved 58 cents to savings and land reserve, no exceptions. Her clothes and truck were moving one direction. Her balance sheet was moving the other. Dale did not arrive at that discipline through personality alone. She learned it in pieces over 2 decades by watching what timing and interest could do to good people. In 1993, when she was 21, she worked seasonal hay for $6.75 an hour and shared a drafty farmhouse with 2 other hands. Her first winter, she tried the common route, financed a used pickup for $8,900 at 11.4%, and learned the monthly payment was not the problem by itself. The repair bill was, the insurance was. The way one late month forced the next month to carry 2 burdens was. She sold that pickup 11 months later for $6,200, paid off the remaining note, and kept the loss written in red at the top of a notebook page she kept for years. Debt steals options first, then sleep. In 1998, she leased 40 acres of mixed hay ground at $52 per acre, bought a used sickle mower for $1,150 cash, and borrowed an older square baler from a neighbor in exchange for labor. The season was uneven, but she finished with 2,940 bales, sold at an average of $3.90 each, grossing $11,466. Fuel, twine, rent, and repairs totaled $7,902. Net was $3,564. Most operators would have called that too small to matter. Dale treated it as proof of method. She took $2,067, exactly 58% of net, and put it in a separate savings account she named Land. The remaining $1,497 covered winter expenses and a transmission rebuild she knew was coming. By 2001, she had enough regular buyers to stop guessing at demand. She stopped selling on promises and switched to clear terms: load appointment, moisture check, payment at pickup. That alone lowered spoilage loss by nearly 9%. In 2003, she bought her own baler, the same 1978 machine people mocked later for $4,800 cash at an estate sale near Cologne. The knotter was temperamental, the pickup teeth were worn, but the frame was straight, and Dale had learned to read steel better than paint. She spent $1,260 on parts, $320 on bearings, and 2 winter months rebuilding it in an unheated shed. By spring, she had $6,380 invested in a machine that produced for years. A comparable finance package available that year would have cost $29,500 with 10% down and payments that totaled more than $41,000 over the note. She kept the ledger line simple: old iron plus patience equals margin. The formative lesson hardened in 2008 when her neighbor Eli Brenner lost his operation during the credit squeeze. Eli was careful, not reckless. He had 320 owned acres, 480 leased, and a plan that worked until rates moved and feed prices did not. His operating line reset, input bills stacked, and by February the bank scheduled an auction. Dale stood at the fence while tagged equipment rolled out in a line, each piece sold below what it had cost to acquire, every bid shaving away years of work. She wrote one sentence that night in the margin of her ledger: never depend on somebody else renewing your future. It was not fear-talking. It was pattern recognition. By late 2010, her method looked unremarkable from the road and increasingly unusual on paper. She sold mostly to small horse owners, hobby barns, and 2 feed stores that took steady monthly loads. She did not chase the highest bid in a panic week. She set consistent prices and kept quality tight enough that repeat buyers became her real asset. She tracked moisture at baling and at loading, rejected suspect stacks, and posted clear replacement terms. That reduced arguments, reduced returns, and built trust that converted into steadier standing orders and fewer payment delays. People called it stubborn. Dale called it calendar control. That phrase, calendar control, sounded ordinary in a good season, but it was the discipline that would be tested first when pressure finally arrived. In the first week of September 2011, she ran one of her routine discipline cycles, the kind nobody notices until years later. Monday, she baled second cutting on 34 acres, averaging 121 bales per acre at 13.2% moisture. Tuesday, she loaded 540 bales for town customers, with payment handled at pickup and collection times staggered through the day. Wednesday, she rebuilt a twine arm for 147 in parts instead of replacing the assembly for 1,180. Thursday, she reviewed every line item at the kitchen table. Gross week revenue, $6,480, direct costs, $2,914, net $3,566, reserve transfer, $2,068. Friday, she took the reserve transfer and split it. $1,500 to land fund, $568 to equipment reserve. No debt service, no interest drag, no bank approval required for the next decision. The same month, Trent returned with glossy brochures and urgency language sharpened by commission pressure. New baler package, he said. Better density, better pickup speed, easy payment schedule. Dale listened, asked for the full amortization printout, and ran a rough total on the back of a feed invoice. Over a long note, interest would push the real cost far beyond the sticker, before repairs outside warranty were even counted. Her current annual maintenance averaged $6,700 even in heavier years. The comparison was not subtle. Finance would buy convenience but sell flexibility. She folded the paper once, handed it back, and said, "Not today." Her living costs reinforced the same philosophy. The farmhouse was modest, fully paid, and efficient because she kept it that way. Annual personal spending in 2011. Food, $5,940. Utilities, $3,480. Truck insurance and tags, $1,720. Clothing, $460. Medical, out of pocket, $2,110. Property tax and maintenance allocated to personal use, $6,870. Total, $20,580. She did not need a large draw from the farm, which meant more retained earnings, which meant more optionality when weather or markets turned hostile. Wealth, in her framework, was not a show of possession. It was the absence of forced choices. By harvest end that year, Dale had sold 7,420 bales, grossed 89,040, and cleared 51,230 after direct and allocated costs. She transferred 29,713 to reserves under the 58% rule and kept her debt at zero. At the co-op counter, she still looked like the poorest operator in line. Rusted truck, patched trailer, faded overalls, cash envelope. But on her kitchen table, under that same yellow bulb, the ledger told a different story in quiet, relentless columns, and that arithmetic was about to be tested by drought, by rising rates, and by advice that sounded reasonable right up until it failed. Late in 2011, after season close and the final reserve transfer, Dale spent winter nights at the kitchen table, reconciling moisture logs, parts bins, and prepaid pickup lists for spring. By April, she was back in the field, checking fences, servicing knotters, and staging twine so first cutting would not start behind schedule. The test arrived by June, and it arrived wearing polished boots. On June 18th, 2012, with pasture already showing thin, gray-green stress and windrows coming up lighter than normal, Dale pulled into the same co-op lot with the same 1999 Chevrolet, same rusted wheel wells, same patched trailer, and a fresh tear stitched across the knee of her overalls with dark thread. She paid $512 in cash for twine and knotter parts, then counted another $176 for hydraulic oil and grease tubes. Trent Halverson was there beside a black dealership pickup with chrome steps and paper floor mats still in place. He had a pressed shirt, a clean logo cap, and a folder thick with financing sheets. Two men at the counter watched him walk over to her, as if the outcome was already known. He did not open with a greeting. He opened with urgency. County yields were collapsing, he said. Alfalfa was down from 2.8 tons per acre toward 1.6 on some fields. Hay in nearby listings was already pushing $16 a bale. He flipped the folder open and tapped a line with his pen. New baler package, $86,400, 8.25% interest, 7-year term, estimated monthly payment $1,357. He said she could not keep patching old iron and still make winter. He said she would lose customers when breakdowns started. He said this was what serious operators were doing. Dale listened, hands resting on the counter, and asked for the full amortization, not the monthly summary. Trent hesitated, then turned to the back page. Total of payments, $113,988 before wear items, before insurance increase, before out-of-warranty repairs. She folded the copy once, slid it back, and said, "I will keep mine running." That answer looked stubborn to people hearing only the surface argument. It was not stubborn. It was cumulative memory turned into policy. Dale's no-debt framework was built from small mistakes, close observation, and years of turning operating details into arithmetic instead of mood. After selling that first finance pickup in 1993 and recording the loss, she began treating every future purchase as two numbers: purchase cost and option cost. Purchase cost was obvious. Option cost was what that decision prevented later. A monthly payment did not just move money out. It narrowed future responses to drought, breakdown, or market swings. Over time, she learned that narrow response windows were what ended farms, not single bad seasons. In 1999, when she was still leasing ground and running second-hand equipment, she tested this idea deliberately. She had $5,940 in savings and a choice between a financed rake priced at $9,600 with 12% down, or a used rake at an estate lot for $2,300 cash plus repairs. The financed route preserved cash, but committed her to 48 monthly payments of $219. The used route burned most of her liquidity up front, but left no fixed obligation. She bought the estate rake, spent $640 on tires and bearings, and kept $3,000 in reserve. That same fall, a gearbox failed on her mower and cost $1,180 to replace. If she had taken the payment plan, that repair would have landed on top of the note. Instead, she paid, fixed, and kept moving. The lesson was practical, not ideological. Reserves absorb shocks, debt amplifies them. She repeated that logic through the early 2000s and wrote each year in tight lines at the back of her ledger. 2004 sold 4,980 bales, average $4.85, gross 24,153, net 9,740, reserve transfer 5,649. 2005, drought pockets, lower yield, gross 22,410, net 7,980, reserve transfer 4,628, no borrowing. 2006, stronger second cutting, gross 29,870, net 12,460, reserve transfer 7,227. 2007, parts heavy year, repairs 5,390, gross 31,220, net 11,040, reserve transfer 6,403. 2008, after Eli Brenner's auction, she increased minimum reserve target from 4 months of operating costs to 10 months. 2009, paid $38,000 cash for 20 acres, adjoining a lease strip she had improved for years. 2010, increased repeat buyer share to 73% of total sales by enforcing quality and pickup windows. None of these numbers looked dramatic alone. Together they formed a capital structure that did not depend on lender confidence. By the second week of July 2012, that structure became visible in day-to-day decisions. Dale held her core grass mix price at $12 for repeat buyers, even while spot listings reached $15 and $16. She reserved a limited premium alfalfa stack for $14, but only at tested moisture and only by scheduled pickup. She changed terms to prepaid time slots, non-refundable except for weather delays, she called herself, and posted moisture cutoffs that were stricter than most local sellers. No stack released above 15.5% internal reading. Flippers hated it. They could not reserve loose inventory and resell in town at panic prices. Reliable customers stayed because they knew what they were getting and when. That summer, she made another quiet decision that looked backward and was actually strategic. She reduced total miles by clustering delivery days and pushed more buyers to pick up, which cut diesel burn from 31.4 gallons per week average in 2011 peak months to 24.8 in 2012. She salvaged twine remnants that would normally be tossed, enough to bind 380 bales over the season. She replaced pickup teeth in small batches rather than waiting for full-set failure, spending $212 three times instead of losing field days to a full breakdown. At the kitchen table, those choices were not anecdotes, they were lines. Fuel cost per bale moved from 0.84 to 0.71. Twine and consumables per bale rose with prices, but less than county average because waste dropped. Net margin held when many operators saw theirs compress. Before we go any further, if you want to see how one fixed price and one refused loan turned into a county auction nobody forgot, stay with this story. Pressure did not ease after drought headlines faded. It changed shape. In 2013, twine boxes that had cost $41 were now $49. Diesel moved unevenly, with local swings that made budgeting harder than a steady high price. 2 wet stretches spoiled windrows and forced rework on acreage that had already absorbed fuel and labor once. Trent kept visiting, and to his credit, he was persistent because he believed his math. He brought side-by-side sheets showing output per hour, bale density gains, and reduced labor with newer packages. Dale reviewed every sheet and did the same subtraction each time. Payment plus interest, plus depreciation, plus insurance, plus risk of being forced to sell into a weak market if cash tightened. She was not rejecting technology. She was rejecting fixed obligations she could not control. In October 2013, when a partial estate liquidation came up outside Carter, she bought what looked like an unfashionable lot. An older accumulator frame, spare knotter assemblies, and 2 bins of mixed wear parts. Total $3,760. New equivalent components would have run above $12,000. Over the winter, she cleaned, measured, and labeled every piece. By spring, she had a shelf system that cut in-season downtime because she no longer waited on parts runs during narrow weather windows. She logged the savings conservatively at $4,980 for 2014, based on avoided emergency purchases and reduced lost field hours. That is what her discipline looked like when you stripped away the folklore. Not luck. Inventory management, timing, and refusal to rent her future for convenience. The same month, she ran her annual household review again. Personal spending had increased, but slowly. Food, $6,220. Utilities, $3,640. Insurance and tags, $1,840. Clothing, $520. Medical, $2,460. Personal share of property tax and maintenance, $7,190. Total, $21,870. Farm draw remained low enough that retained earnings stayed strong. She did not celebrate this. She treated it as maintenance, the same way she treated grease intervals and knotter clearance. If her personal life required too much cash, the farm would carry that stress. If the farm carried that stress, one bad season could force a bad loan. She kept the chain intact by keeping each link modest. By March 2014, with statements reconciled and reserve accounts updated, she had enough to attend a county auction where better capitalized buyers expected her to watch, not bid. Her truck looked unchanged, now past 300,000 miles, and her coat still had frayed cuffs. She bought 80 acres for $146,000 cash after 2 finance bidders dropped out at their lender limits. Closing costs and filing brought the all-in acquisition to $149,860. She paid from land reserve and kept 6 months of operating liquidity untouched. At coffee tables the next week, people called it a gamble. In her ledger, the line was plain: owned acres reduce lease volatility, cash purchase removes refinance risk, Yield decisions remain local rather than contractual. 3 days later, she was back in the field with the 1978 baler, running a repaired twine arm and a fresh set of used pickup bands she had rebuilt herself. A town customer asked whether she would finally raise her base price now that she had bought more land. Dale shook her head and gave the same terms she had given for years. 12 for grass mix, 14 for premium, prepay slot. The customer paid and returned the next month with a neighbor. Trust scaled slower than debt, but it held. By the end of that season, the arithmetic had answered the question Trent kept asking in different forms. She did not need to outspend the cycle. She needed to outlast it. Her 2013 net hay profit closed at $44,280, then 2014 at $47,910, with reserves growing and no principal payments waiting at month end. The rust stayed on the truck. The patches stayed on the overalls. At the co-op counter, she still looked like she was one breakdown from done. On paper, she was becoming the buyer of options in a county full of people selling theirs to make the next payment. The next week, Dale opened a fresh page in the black ledger and wrote 2015 across the top in straight block letters, then drew 7 columns with a ruler that still had a hardware store sticker on it. She tracked the operation in units that let her make decisions early instead of apologizing late. Bales per acre, direct fuel per bale, twine and consumables per bale, repair hours per 1,000 bales, prepaid pickup ratio, weather loss percentage, and reserve transfer. The numbers at season start looked ordinary, but her method did not rely on extraordinary starts. It relied on consistency under pressure. By the first week of May 2015, she had already committed 46% of expected first cutting to repeat buyers through prepaid slots, each with pickup windows, moisture terms, and replacement language typed on one page and signed in ink. That reduced uncertainty before the first windrow was even laid down. She also ran a parts budget as a ceiling, not a hope. $8,400 set aside for repairs, $5,100 for twine, $12,600 for diesel and lubricants, with contingencies stacked inside operating cash rather than borrowed against expected sales. Trent Halverson came by twice that spring with updated financing sheets and lower introductory terms on paper, but the structure remained the same. Fixed payments due whether weather cooperated or not. Dale's 2015 ledger closed like this. Gross hay revenue, $96,780. Direct costs, including diesel, twine, labor help during peak loading days, parts and hauling, $44,440. Net hay profit, $52,340. Reserve transfer at 58%, $30,357. She split that transfer the same day, $22,000 to land reserve, $8,357 to equipment reserve. Her truck crossed 309,000 miles that summer. Her baler crossed 10,000 field hours. Her debt remained zero. She repeated the discipline in 2016 while costs kept climbing. Twine that had been $41 per box in 2013 was now $54. Diesel moved above 3.30 per gallon in her local runs before easing, then climbing again. She adapted with process changes that looked small and compounded fast. Tighter route clustering, stricter no-show penalties on pickup slots, and an extra moisture check before loading stacks that had sat through humid nights. Annual gross in 2016 rose to $101,520. Net closed at $55,110. Reserve transfer added $31,964. At year-end, her combined reserves, after taxes and scheduled maintenance, stood at $247,880. Then 2017 arrived with two truths at once. Demand remained steady, and weather did not. A wet, late window ruined portions of windrows on several fields and forced rebaling on acreage that had already consumed fuel, labor, and daylight. Dale took the hit in the open. She logged spoilage at 7.8% for that cycle, well above her normal range, and revised forward estimates instead of pretending she could make it up later. Gross for 2017 came in at 4,340, net at 56,870, reserve transfer 32,985. Not spectacular, stable. She accepted that profile because stability under stress was her target metric, not maximum bragging rights in one lucky year. 3 days after she closed that ledger year, she attended another county sale and bought 12 acres that connected a narrow access strip she had been leasing awkwardly for years. Purchase price was $28,500 cash, plus $1,140 in closing fees and survey updates. The improvement was operational more than dramatic: better field access, fewer wasted passes, fewer trailer bottlenecks on wet days. She wrote one short line in the margin: efficiency is acreage too. In the margin below it, she added a second rule for future decisions. When a payment plan looked easy in a good month, she would stress test it against the worst month, not the best. More outcomes turned on that difference than most people admitted. In 2018, rates began moving higher, and that changed conversations across Tripp County faster than rain did. Operators with variable exposure felt it first in renewed lines and adjusted equipment notes. Dale felt it mostly as opportunity cost math. She had no principal payments to defend, so she could choose between holding cash and buying land when financing-dependent bidders reached their limits. At the fall auction, she bought 120 acres for $228,000 cash, with total closing costs of $3,420, funded from land reserve while preserving operating liquidity above 10 months. The move looked aggressive from outside because she still dressed and drove like a hired hand. Inside the ledger, it was conservative. Convert reserve dollars into productive acreage without creating fixed obligations. Her 2018 operating numbers held through the acquisition year. Gross hay revenue, $108,960. Net hay profit, $58,930. Reserve transfer, $34,179. After land purchase and closing, she still held $96,300 in liquid operating reserve and $41,700 in equipment reserve. She also began a short-duration treasury ladder for cash that was not needed in season, rolling 6-month bills so idle reserve earned modest return without locking her into long risk. It was a cautious move and entirely in character. She did not chase yield. She defended options. By late summer 2019, with twine now around $63 per box and diesel swinging up to $3.72 per gallon in local peaks, the arithmetic tightened for nearly everybody. Dale adjusted by increasing prepaid ratios, reducing discretionary hauling miles, and adding a small fuel surcharge only on one-off, non-contract deliveries beyond her standard radius. She kept core hay terms unchanged for regulars because trust had become a production asset. 2019 closed at gross $111,840, net $61,420, reserve transfer $35,624. 4 consecutive years had built the same quiet pattern. No debt service, positive net in mixed weather, reserve growth, selective cash acquisitions. The contrast with peers was never about intelligence. It was capital structure and timing, and The timing turned against good people who had made understandable choices. Mark Ellison, whom Dale respected for his work ethic and clean fields, expanded leased ground during stronger years and financed newer machinery to cover 640 leased acres efficiently. His operating model worked when rates were lower and yields held. Then renewals reset. One package payment and associated obligations that had been manageable at roughly $6,900 monthly climbed near $11,200 after adjustments and related costs, while weather shaved production and basis moved against him. He sold pieces, renegotiated where he could, and still lost the lease blocks. Not because he was careless, because his margin for bad sequencing disappeared. Jenna Ruiz followed a different path and faced the same math from another angle. She purchased a horse property for $410,000 with plans to pair boarding revenue and hay sales, a model many local advisors praised during favorable demand years. Then feed volatility, repair surprises, and financing pressure collided. Occupancy dips in boarding months hit cash flow exactly when fixed obligations were due. By the time she listed assets, the market would not return what debt schedules required. Foreclosure paperwork arrived with language that sounded clinical and felt personal. She did not fail for lack of effort. She was working constantly. Her structure gave her no room to absorb shocks. Cole and Aaron Pike were brothers known for long days and honest dealing. They refinanced equipment to consolidate obligations, expecting efficiency gains and volume to cover the note. Debt climbed to $612,000 across machinery and related terms, manageable on projected throughput. Then 2 uneven seasons, softer pricing windows, and higher carrying costs dismantled projections that had looked reasonable on clean spreadsheets. The auction that followed was orderly and heartbreaking in the ordinary rural way, neighbors standing with coffee cups, trying not to stare as tagged equipment rolled past. Dale attended quietly, bought nothing from their line, and later sent both brothers contact information for custom work leads without attaching advice they had not asked for. By the second week of October 2019, co-op conversations had shifted from expansion plans to restructuring talk. Trent still made his rounds, but his pitch changed tone. Less shine, more urgency around protecting productivity. He was not a cartoon villain. He believed upgraded equipment was how operators stayed competitive, and in some structures he was correct. The problem was that many buyers were stacking fixed commitments on top of volatile variables and calling the gap optimism. Dale kept declining, and each decline became less dramatic, because she never turned it into theater. She would listen, ask for full payment totals, and fold the paper back into his folder. The crisis phase did not arrive as a single event. It came as accumulation. Weather variability, input inflation, rate pressure, narrower windows for error. The same headwinds hit everyone in that county, but debt determined who could wait and who had to sell. Dale's zero-interest burden meant she could hold inventory for proper moisture and terms instead of dumping volume to satisfy monthly notes. She could repair in batches, buy parts ahead, and avoid emergency dealer pricing. She could pass on panic purchases at the exact moments panic pricing was highest. One cold stretch in early 2020 made that difference visible in simple weekly arithmetic. A wet period delayed baling windows, then a brief dry break forced compressed field schedules. For operators with large payment stacks, delayed output translated immediately into payment anxiety. Dale had no principal due, so her decision rules stayed technical, not emotional. Bale only in target moisture range, reject stacks outside standard, Keep promised pickups first and preserve reputation even if that capped short-term gross. In 12 days, she turned 1,140 bales under that framework, grossed 13,920 on contracted mix pricing, and protected margin because she did not incur interest drag while doing it. At the same time, casualties continued to surface across the region, and Dale responded with quiet, practical help instead of commentary. She prepaid $4,800 to a local mechanic to prioritize repairs for two small operators, behind on service, asking that her name stay off the invoice conversation. She gave Jenna Ruiz $2,400 worth of tested grass, mix at cost, during a feed crunch month, booked properly in her own ledger as reduced margin community support, not charity theater. She bought custom baling work from Cole and Aaron Pike at fair local rates when she could have done some of that acreage herself, because she knew cash flow stabilizes people faster than sympathy does. By March 2020, she finalized her annual review with the same yellow light, the same ruled columns, and the same old truck parked outside under a yard lamp that flickered in the wind. Gross for the trailing year had held. Net had held. Reserves were intact. Land was owned free and clear. Her operating choices were still driven by agronomy and customer trust, not by lender calendars. Around her, several good farmers were spending most meetings negotiating terms they no longer controlled. Dale was planning cutting schedules. That is where the arithmetic stood as the next demand wave began to build, quietly at first, from town buyers who wanted feed security and were willing to commit cash early for someone they trusted to deliver exactly what the invoice promised. Between early August 2020 and September 14th, 2020, those town buyers stopped asking for one load at a time and started asking for winter certainty, and Dale answered by changing structure instead of chasing panic prices. She kept standard grass mix at $12 a bale. She kept premium alfalfa at $14 when moisture and leaf retention met her test sheet. She required annual contracts with 40% paid up front, pickup windows assigned by week, and forfeiture terms for missed slots unless weather delays were called from her side. On September 14th, 2020, she sat at the same kitchen table and counted contract deposits totaling $45,440, every payment logged by customer name, bale class, and pickup month. By the end of October 2020, demand had nearly doubled from her pre-2020 direct buyer baseline. People who had treated hay as a weekend purchase were now treating it as risk management for animals they had moved out of town. Dale did not exploit that fear. She converted it into planning. She capped each buyer to prevent hoarding, protected long-time repeat customers first, and rejected cash offers above posted rates from flippers who wanted to relabel her bales in town. Trent came by once more with a revised package and lower teaser terms. She asked for total payment again, not monthly. He gave it. She declined again, quietly. Her 2020 ledger closed with numbers nobody at the co-op guessed. Bales sold 8,900. Gross revenue, $113,600. Direct and allocated costs, $45,460. Net hay profit, $68,140. Reserve transfer at 58%, $39,521. She split that reserve the same week, $27,000 to land reserve, $12,521 to liquid short-term instruments. No principal payment due in January. No lender covenant at year-end, just options. A true measure of discipline came after one strong year, when everyone offered reasons to get bigger fast. In 2021, she expanded output through scheduling and field efficiency, not financed machinery. She added contract language for substitute pickup representatives so customers did not lose slots when work travel changed their plans. She purchased 2 used hay wagons for $6,400 cash total, rebuilt deck boards for $980, and increased daily loading throughput without adding debt service. That season closed at 10,200 bales, $126,800 gross, $77,900 net. Reserve transfer, $45,182. In 2022, with input costs still elevated, she held posted prices, tightened spoilage controls, and finished at 11,400 bales, 141,600 gross, 86,240 net. Reserve transfer, 50,019. In 2023, she reached 12,100 bales, 149,400 gross, 89,510 net. Reserve transfer, 51,916, with surplus parked between Treasury bills yielding 5.1% and land reserve cash for opportunistic purchases. By January 2024, she had cash and near-cash capacity, large enough to act when rates pinched financed bidders. Tripp County felt that pressure early in spring. Renewal costs rose, credit committees tightened, auction calendars thickened. On April 22, 2024, the county held a land sale for 3 adjoining parcels, totaling 400 acres. Cars lined both sides of the approach road. Boots crunched old gravel in front of the registration table. Dale arrived in the same 1999 Chevrolet, rust darker now against faded paint. Odometer above 340,000, cap brim frayed, overalls still patched at one knee. Trent Halverson stood near the coffee urn, talking with 2 potential equipment clients, and saw her sign in. He smiled in the practiced way salesmen do when they think they understand the room. "Hay money does not buy quarters," he said, not shouting but not hiding it either. A few men laughed into paper cups. Dale said nothing. She took bidder card 47, folded it once, and placed it in her breast pocket. The bidding moved faster than expected through Parcel 1, slowed on Parcel 2, then stalled into small increments on Parcel 3, as financing limits surfaced in real time. 2 bidders stepped out to call lenders. One returned and shook his head before rejoining the wall crowd. The auctioneer asked for verification from remaining high bidders before combining lots. Dale stepped to the clerk table and placed a bank envelope down. Inside sat a verified cashier check for $1,126,400 made to the county trust account, covering purchase and required immediate deposit terms for all 3 parcels as a combined close. The clerk checked the watermark, called the issuing bank, and got confirmation while the microphone sat live in her hand. "Funds verified," she said. The room changed without anyone announcing it. Trent did not argue. He did not walk over with another printout. He looked at the check, then at Dale, then back toward the lot where his highest commission model sat with a sale sign in the window. She signed transfer documents in 6 places, initialed legal descriptions, and asked one question about fence line maintenance easements before final acceptance. 20 minutes later, she walked back to the old truck and left with title works underway and no financing contingency. The revelation was not a speech. It was paperwork. 3 weeks passed before the second effect showed up. Trent's high-interest equipment branch, already strained by defaults among customers who had upgraded during weak margin years, announced closure. Inventory was moved to a sister location. Trent stayed in the business, but the model that had defined his pitch did not survive the cycle. Nobody celebrated that publicly. Too many families had been squeezed on the way there. The county's numbers kept reinforcing the same test. When pressure rose, operators either bought speed on payments or bought time through reserves. That choice decided more outcomes than weather did. Dale's answer after the auction was not expansion theater. It was structured generosity, tied to responsibility. In July 2024, she established a revolving zero-interest hay and fencing fund with $300,000 segregated in a local bank account under written terms drafted by a farm attorney in winter. Maximum first loan was $35,000. Standard term was 36 months. Payments started after one production cycle, not immediately. Collateral requirements were light but real: inventory lane on financed materials, and a mentorship covenant requiring each borrower to coach one new entrant within 2 years of payoff. The first 6 recipients were selected by August. Lila Monroe, age 32, received $28,000 for perimeter fencing and used handling panels on 54 leased acres. Within one season, she cut feed loss by measured bale waste from 11% to 4.6% and turned positive cash flow by month 10. Ben and Carla Iverson received $35,000 for hay inventory bridging after a late spring flood destroyed stored feed. They preserved their cow-calf herd and repaid $9,800 in year 1. Nathan Crow received $22,500 for reseeding and waterline repair, then added 42 reliable contract customers by the next winter. Rosa Diaz received $18,750 for small bale handling upgrades and moisture storage improvements and moved her rejection rate below 2%. Eli Garner and Priya Garner, siblings starting a compact operation, received $30,000 combined and bought tested used equipment at auction instead of financing new. Dale did not waive discipline for sympathy. Borrowers submitted monthly bail and cost logs. Late report penalties were fixed at $50. Not punitive, but unavoidable. She reviewed each file at her kitchen table every second Sunday evening. One stacked to the left for current, one to the right for follow-up calls. By February 2025, repayment performance sat at 97.4% current status. When the blizzards hit that winter and feed losses mounted across small operators, she added a second mechanism: $85,000 in emergency feed grants distributed to 12 producers based on documented inventory loss and herd count. The grants were not loans and carried no interest, but they required receipts and postseason reporting. Amounts range from $4,500 to $10,000. Mark Ellison received $7,500, which let him keep his conservative 80-acre rental intact without taking high-cost, short-term credit for feed. Jenna Ruiz received $8,000 for boarding horse feed stabilization and avoided a contract default that would have cost her lease ground. Cole Pike and Aaron Pike, now operating a custom baling crew after bankruptcy discharge, received $9,500 for emergency diesel and twine during peak response weeks. They completed contracted jobs on time and retained clients that became the backbone of their next season. The most personal intervention came in land terms. In September 2025, Jenna Ruiz's daughter, Marisol Ruiz, identified a 40-acre tract adjacent to leased ground, but could not meet market bids near $4,900 per acre without taking on debt service that would dominate early cash flow. Dale offered a private land contract at $3,200 per acre, total price $128,000, with 20% down and fixed annual payments over 15 years at zero interest, plus one non-financial clause. Marisol had to mentor one new producer by year 3 and document quarterly meetings. The discount from prevailing market value came to $68,000 at signing. Marisol accepted, paid the down payment from accumulated savings and family labor income, and began with a manageable annual obligation of $6,827 instead of a finance structure that would have exceeded $12,000 before maintenance and taxes. That lesson moved quietly through local conversations among operators who had once believed high payments were the only way to look established. The deeper proof sat in ledgers, not anecdotes. Dale's accountant compiled a full sequence after 2025, close to test whether her philosophy scaled or merely survived. From 2011 through 2019, average annual net hay profit was $53,459, with reserve transfers averaging $31,006. From 2020 through 2025, average annual net rose to $83,662, with reserve transfers averaging $48,524 despite stable posted prices because contract structure improved utilization and spoilage control. Across the full period, cumulative reserve transfers reached 688,812. Land acquired in cash transactions totaled 640 acres after 2014 additions and the 2024 auction parcels, with weighted average acquisition cost of $2,414 per acre against 2026 local valuation near $4,500 on comparable ground. Liquidity analysis mattered even more. At the start of 2024, she held $512,300 between operating reserve, land reserve, and short-term bills. Treasury ladder interest at blended annualized rates between 4.8 and 5.1 generated $24,960 that year with near zero duration risk. After purchasing 400 acres for $1,126,400, she rebuilt liquid reserves through operations, maturities, and disciplined draws to $618,000 by spring 2026. Equipment, much of it old but maintained, appraised near $190,000 replacement adjusted value. Total acreage owned free and clear reached 760 acres with assessed and market-supported valuation around $3,420,000. Net worth calculation in April 2026. Land, $3,420,000. Liquid reserves, $618,000. Equipment, $190,000. Less negligible, short payables, already matched to receivables, yielding approximately $4,228,000. Her personal spending over the same window remained intentionally modest, under $28,000 annually, so retained earnings kept compounding into optionality and then into aid. The multiplier effect became measurable by year 5 of the fund and contract programs. Recipients and second-generation mentees collectively managed 2,140 acres through ownership or controlled long-term leases, with combined reported equity above $9,600,000 based on conservative appraisal methods and documented debt positions. That was the arithmetic nobody saw at the co-op counter when she counted wrinkled bills for twine. One operator, choosing no applause and no payments, had built enough resilience to keep other people from selling under pressures and enough structure to make that help repeatable. By June 2026, the first full cycle of borrowers under Dale's revolving fund had enough data to judge results without sentiment. Lila Monroe's $28,000 loan closed in 32 months, 4 months ahead of schedule, because her feed loss stayed below 5% for 2 consecutive winters, and her custom fencing work created a second income stream that averaged $1,140 per month in peak season. She did not scale recklessly after payoff. She leased an additional 26 acres at $118 per acre, paid 6 months in advance, and kept her debt at zero. Her year-end statement showed $84,600 in total assets and no interest obligations. Ben and Carla Iverson finished 2026 with a healthier balance sheet than they had before the flood. They repaid the original $35,000 on schedule, then built a working capital buffer of $42,300 through retained calf sales and contracted hay purchases locked before winter spikes. Their gross ranch revenue reached $312,400. Operating costs were $247,900, and net before tax was $64,500. They moved $37,000 into reserves and used $18,000 to repair corrals in cash. They also completed their mentorship covenant with a younger couple, Dustin and May Holter, who learned contract feed planning and entered winter with prepaid inventory for the first time. Nathan Crow's trajectory was slower and in some ways more instructive. His $22,500 loan solved reseeding and waterline repair, but his first repayment year included 2 months of missed reporting penalties and 1 delayed installment when a pump failed. Dale did not waive terms. He paid the $50 reporting penalties, caught up on principal, and finished current by year 2. In 2027, with water reliability restored and 42 contract customers stabilized, he posted $96,700 gross hay revenue, $54,200 direct costs, $42,500 net, and transferred $21,000 to his own reserve account. He told other new operators that the most valuable part of the program was not zero interest. It was being forced to keep records clear enough to face bad numbers early. Rosa Diaz used her $18,750 for handling upgrades and moisture-controlled storage, and she became one of the most consistent small bale suppliers in her radius. Rejection rates stayed under 2%, repeat buyer share rose to 81%, and she reached 7,600 bales sold in 2027 without financing new equipment. Her average net margin per bale rose from 4.10 to 6.35 because spoilage and returns fell sharply. She repaid in full, then contributed $3,000 to the revolving fund as a voluntary replenishment gift, written quietly with no plaque and no announcement. Eli Garner and Priya Garner took the combined $30,000 loan and treated it like seed capital rather than spending permission. They purchased tested used equipment for $19,400, spent $4,200 on preventive repairs, held the rest as contingency, and declined 2 dealer promotions that offered deferred payments. By 2028, they controlled 112 acres through a mix of ownership and long lease, carried no term debt, and reported $173,000 in equity. Their mentorship recipient, Kellen Ward, later purchased a used rake and baler package for $7,800 cash, proving that the discipline was being copied, not admired from distance. By the first week of January 2027, the Blizzard grant recipients had their own measurable outcomes. Mark Ellison used his $7,500 emergency grant exactly as filed, feed invoices and transport receipts attached, and preserved his 80-acre conservative rental through spring. He added seed warehouse management income and ended the year current on all obligations with a $14,900 cash reserve, small by some standards and life-changing by his. Jenna Ruiz used her $8,000 to stabilize boarding feed and avoid lease default, then negotiated a longer ground lease at fixed annual terms that removed month-to-month uncertainty. Cole Pike and Aaron Pike used their $9,500 for emergency diesel and twine and retained the clients that now anchor their custom bailing crew calendar from May through September. In 2028, they grossed $418,000, netted $96,300 after labor and maintenance, and kept expansion debt at zero despite repeated pressure to finance newer rigs. If you are learning something from this, pass it to one person who still believes cash discipline is old-fashioned and irrelevant. The program multiplied beyond the first ring because Dale kept structure tighter than emotion. Every recipient had to mentor someone new. Every file had reporting requirements. Every late month had a defined consequence. By 2030, original recipients plus second-generation mentees were managing 2,140 acres with a combined reported equity above $9,600,000. And the revolving account that began at $300,000 had $347,200 available after repayments, replenishment gifts, and controlled new disbursements. The point was never charity as spectacle. It was converting one person's optionality into many families' durability. Trent Halverson's resolution came without drama and without erasure of his earlier mistakes. After his high-interest branch closed, he spent 9 months at a sister location handling liquidation inventory and service referrals. In late 2025, he left that role and reopened as an independent used equipment broker in a smaller lot outside Winter. His new terms were plain language, full cost disclosures, and no packaged financing tied to his commission. He made less per sale and slept better, according to 2 mechanics who still saw him before sunrise. He started telling first-time buyers to run stress tests on bad year numbers before signing anything, a sentence he used to avoid. At a 2027 consignment sale, he saw Dale near the registration table, nodded once, and said, "Straight terms keep people in business," she answered. "They keep options open." That was the entire exchange. He also called 3 former clients he knew had been pushed too hard by payment-first decisions during the tight years. 1 did not return the call. 2 did. He helped one source a lower-cost used baler with verified service history and no financing attached. The sale commission was modest. The operator stayed solvent through a wet season. That was the kind of correction available to him now. Not redemption theater, just better arithmetic applied late. By harvest 2028, the county's informal roll call told the rest of the story in practical lines. Dale West was still in the same modest farmhouse, still under $28,000 in personal annual spending, still running zero debt, and still pricing standard grass mix at $12 a bale for core contracts, while premium alfalfa stayed quality-linked at $14. Her 1999 Chevrolet had crossed 371,000 miles. The rust had spread along the rocker panels, and she still parked at the edge of the co-op lot. The 1978 Baller, now beyond 11,200 field hours, still tied clean knots after winter maintenance and selective part replacement from shelves she had organized years earlier. Mark Ellison still managed the seed warehouse and rented 80 acres conservatively, with no variable rate term exposure. Jenna Ruiz still operated a boarding barn on leased ground and remained current, while her daughter Marisol Ruiz stayed on schedule with the 40-acre land contract at $3,200 per acre and had already mentored 1 new entrant by year 3, as required. Cole and Aaron Pike still co-owned their custom baling crew, replaced 1 truck with a used cash purchase, and kept a written policy against financing depreciating equipment. Lila Monroe now mentored 2 new operators, not 1. Ben and Carla Iverson remained profitable and boring in the best way, with planned feed and controlled costs. Nathan Crow still carried a penalty column on his own spreadsheet, as a reminder of the year he fell behind. Rosa Diaz kept quality logs that other producers now copied. Eli and Priya Garner added acreage only when the lease terms were fixed and survivable. Eli Brenner, whose 2008 auction had shaped Dale's discipline, did not return to full ownership, but he did not disappear. He took a county roads position for steady income, later retired with his house paid off, and now advises younger operators at winter meetings on why variable obligations can break even careful plans. His loss became instruction for people he had never met then. Dale never built a foundation office and never hired a publicity team. She kept the revolving fund local, attorney-reviewed, and deliberately plain. She reviewed files every second Sunday evening at her kitchen table under the same yellow light, 2 stacks as always, current and follow-up. She still bought twine with wrinkled cash envelopes. She still declined to argue in public when someone confused appearance for insolvency. She still let paperwork answer. If you want more stories where quiet numbers outlast loud advice, subscribe and keep watching. If this one stayed with you, leave a comment with the hardest financial trade-off you have faced in your own work. Share this with one person who looks broke from the road, but keeps every promise on paper. The closing image never needed revision. Late August light over cut rows. A patched trailer gate shut with a chain that clicks twice. A faded cap pulled low against dust. $12 a bale written in black marker on a board by the drive. No speech, no revenge scene. Just a woman who was underestimated for 15 years loading hay at a fair posted price, while land titles, reserve balances, and other families' survival kept confirming the same plain thesis. The farmer who looked poorest was richest because she refused to rent her future and then used that freedom to keep others from losing theirs. On the first Sunday evening after that late August run, Dale set the black ledger on the kitchen table, clicked on the yellow light, and opened 2 manila stacks exactly as she always had. Current on the left, follow-up on the right. The rusted binder clip still held moisture logs from the spring cuttings, and the wrinkled cash envelopes from twine and diesel sat flattened in a shoebox labeled 2028 inputs, every receipt matched. At 6:12, the phone rang once, then again. It was Marisol Ruiz calling from the lane by the 40-acre tract. "I finished the third quarter mentorship report," Marisol said. "Signed and scanned. I can bring paper." "Bring paper," Dale said. 7:00. By the second week of September 2028, that ritual had turned into a room full of evidence. At the Tripp County Extension Hall, 12 folding tables held borrower binders, feed loss sheets, and acreage maps marked in highlighter. No speeches, no banner. Dale sat near the coffee urn with a legal pad and asked the same sequence she asked every cycle. Payment status, operating reserve, mentorship hours, and one line on what failed this quarter. Lila Monroe came first, boots dusty, notebook dog-eared. She had closed her original loan early, then added 2 mentees under her own watch. Her fencing side work now covered winter utilities and insurance before hay season started. She slid over a page with 3 lines circled. 2028, gross $138,400, direct costs $82,900, net $55,500, reserve transfer $27,750. No debt. Ben and Carla Iverson brought a typed packet and a handwritten one because Ben still trusted pencil marks more than toner. They had repaid in full and were now pre-buying feed inputs each June. Carla pointed to their operating calendar taped inside the folder. No major payable due in the same month as vaccination and calving expenses. "That one change saved us," she said, tapping the date blocks. Their cash reserve had moved above $50,000 by August, and they had not touched short-term credit in 19 months. Nathan Crow arrived late with grease on his sleeve and an apology already formed. Dale held up a hand, waited for him to sit, and asked for the numbers first. He had paid the late report penalties, caught up principal, and kept the penalty column on page 1 where he could not ignore it. Pump failure had cost him $3,260 in July. Reserve covered it. He looked at Dale and said, "I hated your rules in year 1. She nodded once. "You keep them?" He gave a short laugh. "For myself now." Rosa Diaz brought moisture charts that were cleaner than most bank printouts. Her rejection rate stayed below 2% because she had finally solved airflow in storage with low-cost vent changes and disciplined stacking. She had repaid, donated back $3,000, and started a shared text line for 3 younger producers to swap tested moisture readings before pickup days. Eli and Priya Garner walked in together with Kellen Ward and laid out 3 leases, 1 ownership deed, and a handwritten policy card clipped to the front. No financed, depreciating equipment. Kellen read it aloud without prompting, then grinned when the room laughed. 3 days later, Dale and the local attorney who drafted the fund terms met at the Winter Bank to reconcile the revolving account against physical files. Every disbursement had matching invoices. Every grant had receipts and postseason reporting. The bank manager, who had once offered to streamline her process with generic templates, called back that afternoon after reviewing the file room list and said, "Your paper trail is cleaner than most commercial books." Dale thanked him, wrote compliance call returned and verified on the ledger margin, and filed the note under external contacts completed. In early December 2028, during a wind that rattled the shop siding, Trent Halverson stood in front of 34 operators at a winter equipment workshop and held up 2 estimate sheets side by side. One was a financed package with low introductory language and a high total cost of payments. The other was a used unit with immediate repairs budgeted and no note attached. He did not dramatize his own history, but he did not hide it either. "I used to sell monthly payments," he said. "Now I show full totals first." After the session, he walked out to the lot where Dale had parked the same rusted 1999 Chevrolet near a row of glossy trucks. He looked at the rocker panel corrosion, then at her, and finally said what he had left unsaid at the 2024 auction. "When that check cleared, I knew the room had been reading the wrong balance sheet for years." Dale closed the truck door, cap brim low against the wind. "Rooms do that." Trent's fate settled into ordinary work. His old branch stayed closed. His independent used lot survived because he stopped bundling urgency into every conversation, cut his commissions, and built repeat trust with straight terms. He helped one former client source a 2008 Baler with verified service logs for $18,600 cash and $2,400 in planned repairs instead of a new note that would have doubled annual fixed burden. He made less on that deal than he once made in a week. The client stayed solvent through a wet spring. Trent kept that invoice pinned by his desk. By March 2029, the county roll call read like a set of corrected trajectories. Mark Ellison still managed the seed warehouse and rented 80 acres on conservative fixed terms, current on every bill and carrying a reserve he updated monthly. Jenna Ruiz ran her boarding barn on leased ground with no arrears, and Marisol stayed current on the zero-interest 40-acre contract at $3,200 per acre, mentoring 2 entrants instead of 1 because the first asked for help and brought a friend. Cole and Aaron Pike kept their custom baling crew lean, replaced 1 truck with a used cash purchase at $26,400, and turned down dealer financing twice in public without apology. Lila kept mentoring. Ben and Carla kept planning feed before panic season. Nathan kept his penalty column. Rosa kept her logs. Eli and Priya added acreage only when lease terms survived bad year math. Kellen paid cash for parts and wrote dates in marker on every filter in his shed. By the first week of June 2030, the multiplier Dale had aimed for was no longer a projection. Original recipients and mentees controlled 2,140 acres. Combined reported equity, audited against deeds, lease positions, and debt statements, stood above $9,600,000 on conservative valuation. The revolving fund that began at $300,000 showed $347,200 available after repayments, replenishment gifts, and new disbursements. Dale reviewed the full binder under that same yellow light, then moved one final unresolved file from follow-up to current. A feed grant receipt packet that had been missing signatures from a blizzard month. Mark delivered the signed pages himself, set them on the table, and said, "I did not want your books ending with my paperwork wrong." Dale slid the packet under the binder clip and nodded. Autumn 2031 brought one more quiet closing of old threads. The younger co-op buyer, who had once asked for discounts on weathered bales, came to the drive, hat in both hands, and handed Dale a typed thank you from his daughter, now one of Marisol's mentees. He admitted he had judged by overalls and truck rust because that was what he understood then. Dale read the note, folded it, and placed it in the ledger drawer with Eli Brenner's old auction clipping and the red ink page from 1993. Distinctive details kept for a reason. Lessons with dates. Dale never changed the house, never chased public credit, and never moved away from the two-stack ritual. Her annual personal spending stayed below $28,000. Her acreage remained free and clear. The 1978 Baler kept running past 11,000 hours because maintenance stayed boring and exact. The patched trailer gate still shut with 2-chain clicks. The board by the drive still read $12 a bale in black marker for standard grass mix, with premium quality listed separately and tested every load. Late in August 2032, golden light laying long over cut rows, she finished a final pickup slot for the day and stood by the trailer while dust settled in the lane. No crowd, no ceremony, just paper that matched reality. Around her, people who had once been one storm away from losing ground were now making decisions from reserves instead of panic, teaching others the same discipline in barns, kitchens, and shop bays across the county. Appearance had never told the truth of that place. Arithmetic did. A rusted truck, patched overalls, cash envelopes, and a ledger under a yellow bulb looked like scarcity to anyone glancing fast. In practice, they were the tools that bought freedom, then turned freedom outward. Dale West kept hay at a fair posted price, kept debt off her neck, and kept promises in writing. That was the whole philosophy. Quiet to watch, powerful to live. And in winter, South Dakota, it endured because the numbers kept proving it.